So if it takes all of our minds, all of our genius to create a half-hearted imitation of our mind, how much more sophisticated is the ultimate mind that created our minds in the first place? So the fact that we have AI actually proves God's existence, doesn't disprove it.
Well, welcome back to the Finding Something Real podcast, friend. This is your host, Janelle Wood, and I'm so excited to be joined by one of our favorite returning guests here on the podcast today. But before we introduce him, I'm also joined by two wonderful co-hosts that have come back for this conversation, and that's Cailee and Sarah. Hi, Cailee. Hi, Sarah.
Hello. Hey.
What's something exciting happening in your life right now? I'm just going to throw that out there. Something exciting happening in your life.
My brother and I are reading Narnia, and that's really been fun.
Wow. Have you read it before?
No, never.
Okay. Which book are you on?
The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. The second
Okay.
one.
Nice. Classic. How about you, Cailee?
I started a new job this month. So, well, I guess it's December now, so last month. And that's been really cool. It's been exciting.
Awesome. And when we air this, you'll probably have been in this job for a couple of months or at least a few weeks. So hopefully It's still going great too.
I think it will be.
Yeah. Today's guest is Abdu Murray. He's a speaker, author, and president of Embrace the Truth Ministries. And Abdu, I'll ask you the same question. What's something you're doing right now that you're excited about?
Well, at the time we're actually talking, the year is wrapping up, and so I'm wrapping up a very busy year of ministry, traveling all over the place, and it's just been super fruitful. And we come off a very busy university schedule and doing a lot of university work and international stuff. I had the pleasure of being in Argentina and in Dubai and recently, and looking forward to the release of a book I just got done writing a couple months ago. And, you know, these things, the projects happen when you get done with the book, you record the audio books and all that stuff, and then it has to go through the machine, and then it gets released, and that'll happen in February. And I'm excited that pre-orders are available right now. So anybody who wants to join the launch team can do so by going to our website, embracethetruth.org, and find out how you can be a part of the launch team and pre-order and get free stuff. We have a lot of free stuff we're giving away, including the first 2 chapters of the book. So I'm excited about that. And I'm really excited to stop traveling this month because it gears up in earnest starting in January. I'll be at various universities. I think we have 10 universities scheduled for next year. And it kicks off with MIT. So I'm looking forward to that. And I have a debate with Dan Barker coming up, and a dialogue with, if everything works out, a dialogue with Shabir Ali, who's one of the premier Muslim apologists in the world at Harvard, if it all works out. So I'm excited about a lot of stuff, I suppose I should say. Yeah.
Wow. I've been watching from afar, seeing the fruit of some of your ministry and the way that God's been growing it. And it's been pretty beautiful to behold, I have to say. And just knowing, I don't know, a little bit of your story and, what did I just,
I've done that so many times.
So I'm very excited for what God's doing with your ministry, Abdu.
Thank you.
And also, as we're recording this, I just watched a video that your ministry released about your ministry, and it was so compelling. It was one of the best videos, short videos about a ministry that I've seen. So I want to link it in the show notes. Is that available on Instagram or your website?
We can definitely get the link over to you. Are you referring to the university video, the Day in the Life? Yeah, that I got to give all credit to our media guy, Zach Falzon. Zach is not really a media guy; he's a filmmaker. And what I loved about that video was it was a documentary of what it's like to go from bang to bullets. You know, to go from when we start at a university event to when it ends. And we don't like to leave until the last student leaves. It was a beautiful, when we shot it, I was like, this is terrific. This is unbelievable. And so, yeah, we'll definitely get that to you. And I think there's a YouTube link for it. So we happily get that to you.
Yes, please do that. And then we want to hear more about this book. You may have a couple people who might be on your launch team right here. I don't know, but
we'll see.
Tell us more about it.
Yeah. So this is what it looks like. There, you probably can't see the subtitle because of the way the thing is. It's called Fake ID, How AI and Identity Ideology Are Collapsing Reality and What to Do About It. So essentially, the book takes two cultural, what I call cultural tsunamis that have resulted from the post-truth sequake. We're in a post-truth culture right now where we don't deny that truth exists. We simply subordinate it to our feelings and our preferences.
Hmm.
And so what happens is a sequake erupts and changes the way we think of truth. Two tsunamis have resulted from that. One is an identity ideology, which enforces a certain kind of ideological idea about what it means to be human. And the other one is AI, what I call AI mania. And I'm not against AI. I actually use it all the time. What I am worried about is the mania with which we're embracing this thing. And that is its own cultural tsunami. And both, whether it's an identity ideology, which is telling you don't believe your own eyes, don't believe the science, or it's AI, which is giving you deep fakes and other ways in which we can manipulate reality, both are causing a reality collapse. In other words, reality itself isn't collapsing, but our ability to discern it is starting to collapse. And we're really getting muddled in the idea of what does it mean to be human? And we can recover that if I think the argument is that from a Christian perspective, we can actually recover the beauty of reality and the beauty of what it means to be human when we anchor ourselves in the idea of the imago Dei and what it means to be made in God's image. And if we do that and fully understand this, then we can anchor ourselves and ride out the tsunamis that are trying to collapse reality. But we can fortify it if we anchor ourselves in truth.
Well, it's very timely. I was just watching the Diary of the CEO podcast a couple weeks ago, and I think the guy's name was Tristan Harris.
Yes.
I totally looked that up right before you got on because I was like, who was that guy? And it was very disturbing to listen to some of the things he was saying about people playing God and wanting to, this race for power. And then and immortality in a lot of ways. And then before that, I was listening to one that I think came out in June with Jeffrey Hinton, the grandfather of AI. So I've been curious about this and had a lot of thoughts on it too for quite some time. And it was so cool because we were recording a week and a half ago or so. And Cailee here, she was like, Janelle, could we get someone on to talk about AI? And I said, wait a second, we already have somebody coming on to talk with us about whatever we want. And I think he wrote a book about it. So it's perfect timing. And Cailee even wrote out some questions for you. So Cailee, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, let's hear it.
Yeah, well, I should have written them down. I was practicing them in my head, but I didn't actually write them down. So I'm going to try my best. So as an artist and a Christian, I've really been struggling with AI and like the uprise of AI. And so I'm mostly just curious what you think about everything going on with AI being a Christian and specifically with AI is kind of its own like all-knowing intelligence. So like that we have access to literally everywhere. We can just go ask it a question or ask it to make us an image that doesn't exist. So I was curious your views on that as a Christian, and how you think AI ties in with Christianity, or how just because I always look at it as it's kind of a, how am I trying to put this? It's kind of like, it is kind of like it's playing God almost. And just with how reliant people are becoming on it. And I also think that it kind of takes away creativity or critical thinking. Yeah, so I'm just curious on your thoughts on all of that.
Yeah, thanks, Cailee. And you said a lot of things in there. And I will tell you, as a shameless plug, I did literally cover everything in this book. However, I'll give you the snapshot of how I think about these things. As someone, it's funny, I'm glad I'm talking to somebody who's an artist, because I dabble, and the key word is dabble, in digital art on my iPad. I would not call myself an artist, but I am someone who dabbles in it. So I'm very, very curious about how technology and art interact. And I got really interested in this topic of artificial intelligence when there was a guy named Jason Allen a few years ago who won an art contest, and there was a digital art category in this contest, and he won first prize for a piece called Théâtre de Spatial, I think it was. And you look at this image, and it is really something. It is dazzling. And you're like, wow, that should win first prize. And it did. And then it later came out that he used Midjourney which is a generative AI module that you can get a subscription to, and you can create kind of any image you want. And he used that. And then when it was determined that he used it, a lot of the artists cried, unfair, that's cheating. While it's a digital media, you're supposed to use a light pen or some kind of a thing to actually create an image onto a digital canvas. And he didn't do that. He just used prompts and words. And the AI did the work. Well, the judges actually looked into it, and they let him keep his prize. And what was fascinating to me was, as Jason Allen was responding to the criticism that this isn't really art, this is his words. This is an artist talking. He said, "It's over. Art is dead. AI won. Humans lost. This is not going to stop." And he was boasting about it. And I thought, what a strange thing to do as an artist, to boast about the fact that you used a medium that will essentially render you obsolete. In other words, we think of ourselves as special, human beings as special, because of our ability to think creatively, to paint, to create music. I mean, right now, there is the number one country song is non-human generated. It's generated by an AI. If I'm not mistaken, and I may be, but I'm pretty sure I'm right, the number one Christian song right now is not.
I just heard about that.
It's not human. There's no soul in it at all. There's no sense of human creativity in this thing, and yet it tops the charts. I think probably, I'll just tell you guys, I think one of the reasons why they top the charts is because they're not particularly good songs, but because they're made by AI, there's this sort of novelty fascination with them, and so that causes them to become number one, not because of the quality, but because of the novelty, which will, I think, wear off. But it begs the question. Well, it causes us to think of the question: what does it mean to be human if a machine can act just like us? What does it mean for there to be a God if a machine can act just like God? You think about it, God is omnipotent and omnipresent and all-knowing. And yet, on all of our systems of computers, Gemini and ChatGPT and Copilot and you name it, they're all available everywhere. So they're everywhere, and they seem to know everything. A couple of things. One, they don't know everything. They make plenty of mistakes. You have to check it all the time. As sophisticated as they're becoming, and I've got some that I use for various reasons, not generatively. I don't like to use it to generate material because I think it does sap me of my creative abilities if I rely on it too much. But I do use it for idea bouncing and some research stuff, but I got to double check it. And I got to tell you, I got to double check it all the time because it gets its sources wrong. It makes up sources. It creates phantom sources. It hallucinates all the time. Even now, as good as it's getting, it still makes mistakes. And the images it creates are still kind of creepy. However, some of the stuff is becoming very, very convincing. So a couple of things from a Christian perspective on this. The first thing I think of is the fact that AI exists, the fact that we have this simulacrum, this imitation of the human mind, screams out for the idea of a divine mind. It actually argues in favor of God's existence, not against God's existence. And the reason why I say this is because one of the things I've noted in the book, but I'm also talking about all the time and thinking about, is there are people who are starting to think, well, if this soulless thing can do the things that I do, maybe I'm soulless too. Maybe we don't need a soul to be creative and to think and to problem solve. If this thing doesn't have a soul, then maybe I don't have a soul. Maybe I just have a biological version of an algorithm and I'm just a machine. And the transhumanists, who are people who want to have us merge with human level intelligence AI, which we're not at, by the way. We do not have human level intelligence AI. We're not even close. Ray Kurzweil thinks we are. We're not. And I don't think we're ever going to get there. However, we might. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. But they say we should merge with this thing. And when we merge with this thing, we'll download our consciences or our consciousnesses into various computer media, and then we'll live forever, and we won't decay, and we won't be bound by our bodies anymore. One, I think that is a science fiction. It will remain that, because you are not data. You are an immaterial soul, and there's great reasons to believe that you have an immaterial mind, that your mind and your brain are not the same thing, and your thoughts are not data. Your thoughts are something different. They're transcendent, and we can actually show this philosophically. So you can't download that into a machine. You can download data, but not actual consciousness. That's one thing. But second, notice what's happening. It's this statement that you're a machine. That's all you are. You are a biochemical, sophisticated machine. And we're going to, but don't worry, you're a really creative one. You're a really sort of crafty machine that if we work together, us crafty machines, will create an ultimate machine, which will be godlike, will merge with it and will become God. The reason why I think the Bible is such a credible book is because it has spoken about this for 3,000 years, if not longer, 3,500 years plus. This is the Adam and Eve story, but told in a digital story, in a digital garden. Is that what was the Adam and Eve story all about? Adam and Eve lived in a garden, and their purpose was to commune with the God of that garden. But they wanted to be God, not be with God. And so they partake of that fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. And God says, you'll die in that day. You won't be able to handle it. And then they spiritually die in that day. The transhumanists would say that Eden was not a sin. Eden was just premature. We could take a bite of the apple now because we've created this machine that can help us to achieve godhood. They're wrong about that, but that's part of what's going on here. And you can cite a million people tell you all about that. So the fact that the Bible predicts this and predicts this part of human nature for 3,000 years has gotten our human nature right. And AI is proving to be the fruit that would promise us godhood but won't deliver. That's a biblical idea. And we're seeing it played out in our culture live right in front of our eyes. That's amazing to me that the Bible predicts that kind of a thing well before technology's even developed. But second, there's a woman named Alison Gopnik, and she is an AI researcher, but also a researcher in education and psychology for childhood development. And she points out something really interesting because we think of AI as this intelligent thing, but it really isn't. When you and I learn something, if we want to learn as kids what a cat is, and I showed you a cat as a 4-year-old, you would instantly, probably even well before you were 4 years old, say, okay, that's a cat. I don't need to show you 10,000 versions of a cat before you know what a cat is, as opposed to a dog. You can pick out the difference between a cat and a dog fairly quickly. You don't need 10,000 instances of it. And then you can look at a small cat, a domestic house cat, and then see a picture of a lion, or even walk up to a lion in a zoo, behind a cage, behind glass, and figure out that's just a big cat. You can see the differences between a house cat and a big cat, but realize cat. You can kind of do that pretty early in your life. AI, however, even the most sophisticated ones we have to be trained on hundreds of thousands of pictures of cats and dogs and other animals, and then go through a merit and demerit system where if you get it right, you get a plus. If you get it wrong, you get a minus. It's trying to score the highest possible points on this thing. So it's got to see all these comparative pictures and images, 3D and otherwise, to figure out, okay, that's a cat. And then it gets it right now. It's good at it now. But it took it hundreds of thousands of trials and errors. We don't do any of that. We do it immediately. If you want to teach an autonomous vehicle how to drive, you have to give it simulations where it crashes 100,000 times and kills people in simulations 100,000 times before it figures out not to kill people. You know how many times you got to teach a 16-year-old kid that when they're learning how to drive? 0. They already know it. So the way we learn, and what Gopnik called it, was the paradox of human learning. And she said this: until we figure out the paradox of human learning, even the smartest AIs will not be able to compete with the average human 4-year-old. Here's what that tells me. That tells me that all of our minds, the collective intelligence of all of the computer scientists over the course of decades, have poured money and blood and sweat and tears into creating an AI that can't even compete with a 4-year-old. So if it takes all of our minds, all of our genius to create a half-hearted imitation of our mind, how much more sophisticated is the ultimate mind that created our minds in the first place? So the fact that we have AI actually proves God's existence, doesn't disprove it. And it actually goes to show you that the human nature that we're flirting with artificial intelligence was predicted in the Bible years and years and years and years ago, shows you not only this is the God, but maybe he's the God of this Bible, and he's really wise, and he really knows what he's talking about. So that's more of the argumentation area of how AI actually shows that God exists. But because of human nature, and I fundamentally believe this, the problem is not in the silicon of the AI, it's in the soul of the humans who use it. AI can be a force for incredible good. And we've seen tremendous leaps in autism treatments using artificial intelligence. We've seen tremendous leaps forward in diagnoses of medical phenomena and these kind of things, and creative problem solving and pattern recognition. It's great for all that stuff. But when we use it in a generative way, when we use it to write our essays, when we use it to create our art, when we use it to create music and all these things, something about us atrophies. In fact, you pointed this out, Cailee, and I think that you're 100% right about this, is that something dies in us, or at least weakens, the more and more we use artificial intelligence, become dependent on it. MIT, OpenAI, and I think Microsoft had some preliminary research on the cognitive effects of over-reliance on artificial intelligence. And what they discovered was people's creativity decreases, their memory about what they wrote, or what the AI wrote for them, rather, is very, it dips to shockingly low levels. And there's an epidemic of loneliness. The more you use the voice feature, it's weird. The more you use the voice feature on these LLMs, the more lonely you become. Which you think it's like talking to a human, but you kind of know deep down inside, you're not talking to a real intelligence. You're talking to an imitation of it. And then there's sort of this depressing thing that happens when you realize I'm spending all my time with a fake thing. And you're forsaking relationships with non-fake things. And then one of the shocking things that came out was that people, I can't remember the age bracket, I think it was 25 and younger, a shockingly high number of young people, I think like 1 in 4, report that they are unable to make almost any decision without first asking ChatGPT what to do. We're seeding, and my biggest issue is not that the machines will become more human-like. I'm not worried about that. What I am worried about is that the humans will become more machine-like, that we'll start listening to whatever this thing tells us. And this is the interesting thing. Midjourney can create a painting based on a prompt, but it can't get inspired by a sunset. It won't look at the sunset and say, you know what, that moves me. Let me write a sonnet about it. Let me create a painting that will hopefully move someone and get them to feel the depth and the beauty of the sunset. It won't do that. It just doesn't do that. It doesn't think counterfactually. It doesn't look at a world where there should be an invention that hasn't been made yet and then make it. We do that because we reflect our creator. But AI doesn't. It's incapable of doing that. And we're not even close to being able to make it get inspired by something. So I'm not as worried about what AI will become. I am worried what will become if we rely too much on it. And so I want to encourage you to keep going with the resist the machine, resist using the machine to do your creative work for you, because you'll notice in 2 years, something will wither in you. Something wonderful will wither in you. And that would be an ultimate tragedy. Use it as a tool, as a tool of your God-given intellect, but don't use it as a substitute for your God-given intellect. That's when we'll really, really pay the price. So that's how I look at it, generally speaking. I'm sure I left a couple of things unsaid that you were thinking about and wondering about. I'm happy to field some more stuff on that. But that's my general idea about what's going on with artificial intelligence. I think we are trying to play God. I think it won't work, and it'll hurt us. It's like the first time we try to do it. But if we rely on this idea of the Imago Dei and our creativity and being specially and wonderfully made in God's image, I think we can hold the line on reality and not let it collapse. In fact, that phrase, reality collapse, I didn't come up with that. As I point out in the book, that was Tristan Harris and Asa Raskin who gave a presentation, and they just mentioned the word reality collapse oh so briefly. And I'm like, whoa, that's a huge word. What did you mean by that? So I wrote a whole book about it.
How then should...
Yes, very. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just a follow-up question to that then, Abdu. How then should we live? Because
Mhm.
it's almost a romantic notion, right? To remember we're made in the image of God, the Imago Dei, AI can't be inspired. I mean, 100% agree with you. In the meantime, we've got people like that Tristan Harris sounding the alarm, and people like Jeffrey Hinton going around saying, these are basically going to be human beings, right? I mean, I listened to him talk about that, about how he's, what is a soul, these kind of things. And so we're living in an age where people are going to be very confused, where people are using it for creative purposes, where they're using it for companion purposes. I think some statistic is like 1 in 4 people are using, like young people are using it possibly for companionship, which is crazy. I heard that statistic. I don't even know where, and I don't know if it's true. Don't quote me. Look it up.
Well, I'll tell you though that there have been stories, and a guy named his first a young kid, 14 years old, named Sewell Setzer III, created a character in character.ai, being sued right now by his family because he created a character called Dany after Daenerys, which is one of the characters of Game of Thrones, and he falls in love with it, and it tells him to come join her. And he does. He needs to leave his mortal body to go join her, so he kills himself.
Yeah.
And that's a real story.
Yeah.
And that is not the only one like that.
Right.
So going into the how should we live then, I think a couple of things. One is I think we need to teach ourselves and then young people to not use something. Don't use something that's powerful until you read the manual, so to speak. Until you really know what this thing can do. And I think there should probably be, whether it's individually, privately instituted warning labels of some kind or whatever it might be, is that you really understand what this thing does and understand the research of what it can do to you by over relying on it. I was sitting next to an executive from a very high level executive from a very well-known tech company on a plane. I happened to be writing an article on AI. And she asked me, "Hey, what are you writing?" And I said, "I'm writing this article on AI." She says, "Oh, great! I'm in sales, the division of thus and such company, and we're really excited about our AI." I'm like, "Well, what excites you about it?" And she went on and on about how exciting it was. And I was like, "That is pretty cool. What scares you about it?" I asked her, and she paused, and she said, "We don't know what this will do to us." And I said, "Okay, explain." And she said, when social media came out, it was a huge disruptor. It changed everything. Now, Cailee and Sarah, you guys might be too young to fully have realized the paradigm shift that Janelle and I experienced when social media became a thing and everything became social media, because we experienced the becoming of it. You're experiencing that same social shift with AI. So you'll tell your kids and the young people you're influencing, you don't know what it's like for them to see the seismic shift. You're experiencing now what Janelle and I experienced about 15, 20 years ago with the advent of social media, more like 15 years ago. And she said, we didn't know what social media would do to us. And it's this disruptor. She said, AI is 1 billion times more disruptive than social media ever will be. And I said, well, that means we have to be sober-minded about this, and maybe the companies that are making it should actually think about what it is we should tell ourselves about what this is going to do to us. We had scant evidence publicly about what social media would do to us, and now we have tons of evidence. Read Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation, and it'll cause you to want to cancel your Instagram account, that's for sure. But we do have some information about what this is doing to us. We do have educators who are telling us that the use of screens in classrooms is detrimental to learning. Kids learn worse with screens than they do with actual paper. And AI augments that. So we know that stuff. So I think, how should we then live? I think generally speaking, we should actually warn ourselves of the dangers of overuse. Ask these developers before we buy a subscription or they make it free to put the time limits on it. And some are doing that. Some of them are actually doing time limits on the AI usage because they're recognizing overuse on this kind of stuff. But as Christians, I think the second part of education isn't just talking about what AI can do to us, but I think talking about what it means to be a human being and really inculcate a sense of true creativity, a sense of true, like, actual practices of creating something and critical thinking and questioning AI and using AI to do a game that I call spot the truth, spot the lie. Like, how do you actually look at the world critically and say, where's the truth in what's going on out there, and where's the lie? And you can do that with AI as well. When it spits out something at you, it probably is biased based on who is programming it. So don't just take it in hypercritically. So how can we then live, I think, is as Christians, is really sit down with young people and ourselves especially, and practice what we preach, and go through exercises of critical thinking and use our God-given ability to critically think and not rely on these machines to do it for us.
So many follow-up questions to that, and I'm going to step back here and ask Sarah what she's got. Sarah always has great questions.
Good, I can't wait.
So I'm just thinking to circle back on consciousness, and something that came to mind was the Tower of Babel, where the people are trying to get to the heavens, to be their own gods type of thing. And so the idea that, like, the question of consciousness that we still have about where does it come from, and then with AI in a way trying to create consciousness, do you think if we were able to do that or find out the source of consciousness, does that undermine the idea of God being the one giving that to us?
Great question. I feel like you guys read my book already, because I have a whole section of the book on consciousness specifically, and about whether or not the sort of the materialist view of consciousness undermines God, or whether or not consciousness itself transcends that. So I'll refer. I think what I might do, Janelle, if you're good with it, and Cailee and Sarah, if you're okay with this, is that if we can get some place to send free copies of this to you, I would love to do that. So you can take a look at some of the stuff I've written on this and critique it, use it to even out your tables. I don't know, but just if you are interested in reading it, I'd love to send you guys free copies of it. A couple of things. One is there are some out there, some materialists, who would say that consciousness is simply a matter of brain states, and they try to give you certain, kinds of theories about where consciousness comes from. And they'd say it's a thing called emergentism. There's a thing called epiphenomenon, where it's really just an emerging phenomenon based on your brain states. And they'd say things like, we have proof of that. When someone gets Alzheimer's, for example, and certain parts of their brain cells start to die, they change their personality, or they forget things, or whatever it is. And that shows that the brain and your personality, your consciousness are definitely linked, and they're one and the same. I think they're linked, but I don't think they're one and the same. And I think that for a couple of reasons. One is that there is a fancy dancy term for a philosophical precept called the law of the indiscernibility of identicals. Okay, so it's a fancy way to say, how do you know that A and A are really the same A? How do you know these two things are identical? And so the law goes something like this. Anything that's true of A, let's use different letters, A and B. Anything that's true of A has to also be true of B if A and B are the same thing. And anything that's possibly not true of A can't be true of B if they're the same thing. So you follow me so far? That they have to be true, they have to be equal in every way for them to be the actual same thing. Now, I'm not talking about identical things that are different things, like identical twins that are genetically exactly the same. Because although there's a lot of things that are true about the identical twins, there's one thing that isn't true about them. They're not occupying the same space-time coordinates. So if twin A is standing here and twin B is standing here, there's one thing about them that's different, which means that though they look similar, they're not the same thing. They're not the same being. So that would hold true that if our consciousness is limited to our brain states and to the data and to the electrical impulses that happen in our brain, then everything true of our brain states has to be true of our consciousness as well. If anything about our consciousness is different than our brain states, then they can't be the same thing. You follow that so far? Mm-hmm. So that means that when I think about consciousness, the first thing I think about is what's called aboutness. So I have thoughts about things, all right? So I have thoughts about the fitness of my hat, or the whether the background is well lit, in my room right now, in my office, or I have thoughts about the door to my office. I have thoughts about it. But physical things, my brain states don't have thoughts about things. They're not about things. So like purely physical phenomenon are not about each other. So let's say I take this pen and my AirPods case. Okay, these are two things, two physical things. There's nothing, this is not about this. This is just next to it, but it's not about it. I'm describing the physical phenomenon of their spatial relationship, but this is not about this in any way. But my thoughts are about my pen. They're different, and my brain states register where the pen is in space-time. It registers the color, the reflection of the light on it, that I'm holding it. That's all data, but I have thoughts about my pen, like this helps me write. I like this pen more than I like this pen, and I tend to write better when I use this pen than when I write with this pen. See what I'm saying? There's something about my thoughts that's not true of my brain states. I have intentionality. Brain states have intentionality where there is a purpose and thoughts have intentionality, whereas brain states don't have those. There's a million things about my brain that are not true of my thoughts, and my thoughts that are not true about my brain. So they can't be the same thing. There's a number of reasons why we can recognize that consciousness is not dependent upon the brain, even though it's linked to it, because it's not the same thing. It is different in many, many different ways. So consciousness is just fundamentally different than brain states. Now, the fact that your brain, when it gets injured, for example, might cause personality differences, that doesn't prove anything. All it proves is that there is a functional link between my brain and my thoughts. My friend Greg Kokel, who's also a mutual friend with Janelle as well, he put it this way, really well. Your mind is the driver of the car. Your brain is the car. So no matter how much the driver wants to drive to the left, if the axle's broken in the car, he's not driving to the left. So he can want to all he wants, and he can have the intentionality and the aboutness of what it means to drive to the left. But if the car is broke, he ain't doing it. So just because the car is broke doesn't mean there's no driver. So if the brain is damaged or otherwise altered in some way, it doesn't mean that your thoughts are not immaterial. It just means that your thoughts can't manifest themselves in the physical world using the organ that allows your immaterial thoughts to manifest in the world. Do you follow me so far? Mm-hmm. So what that means is that if our thoughts are immaterial, then they are not data. And if they're not data, then they're not AI, because AI is all data. There's nothing emergent about it. The algorithms play on data. They're reliant on the physical medium to store them and to express them. And so there really isn't a comparison between human consciousness and anything having to do with artificial intelligence or anything physical. Our consciousness is related to the physical, but it isn't the same thing as the physical. In fact, there are two atheists who are very strongly in agreement with what I just said. One of them is a guy named Thomas Nagel, who is a professor of philosophy out of New York University. And he wrote a book called Mind and Cosmos. It's a short little book, but it's brilliant. And he basically says, look, I'm an atheist, but the fact of the matter is the physicalist Darwinian idea of how we got consciousness is almost certainly wrong, because consciousness is not a feature of physical things. And so he wants to put consciousness in the universe itself, that the universe, somehow consciousness is just baked into the universe. It's called panpsychism. But panpsychism suffers from a huge number of problems, a huge number of, I think, insurmountable philosophical problems. So he's trying his best to find out where consciousness comes from, and he's saying it's in the universe itself. But he himself recognizes, look, we're not there. We're not even close. We can't really solve that problem. I'd like it to be there. And here's the cool part. Why does he have to resort, as an atheist, why does he have to resort to putting consciousness in the universe itself? Because he recognizes that consciousness cannot be accounted for by mere evolutionary means. And he doesn't want it to be God, So he just gives it the universe. And the fact that he has to go there and say the universe itself is conscious, that our subatomic particles are all conscious, the fact that he has to resort to that means that the God hypothesis is pretty strong, because he has to avoid it by going to this otherwise very brilliant man, has to go to a silly place to say where consciousness is lodged, just to avoid that it comes from God. So I think we're not going to disprove any sense of the immaterial consciousness. We're coming closer and closer to a consensus within philosophical circles, and I would even say in some senses some psychological circles, that human consciousness is actually immaterial. It's not based on the mind. It's not based on the brain. So I'm not worried about the trend going against God. I'm actually pleased to see that the trend, even with atheists, is going towards the God hypothesis, not away from it. And AI doesn't prove that consciousness is somehow artificial, or it's this feature of the natural world. Rather, what AI is showing us is that we have to try to fake it. We're faking a sense of consciousness, but it's not conscious. It's just not. It doesn't have the same things that we have, and it's not even close. So in one sense, I'm thrilled, because AI is actually demonstrating that human consciousness is actually immaterial, which is exactly what the Bible sort of says, is that we're mind, body, and spirit. We're not just bodies that fake having a spirit. We're actually something immaterial that is meant to be linked to something material, which is our bodies. So is that helpful?
That was so helpful. Thank you. That's very intelligent. I'm going to have to think about it for a little bit, but I agree with a lot of what you said.
Oh, good. Well, I'll send you, like I said, if we get a chance to send you the books, and we can figure out a way to do that, my assistant can get you guys the books, and you can think about it by reading about it if you'd like.
I would love that.
There's an audiobook version of it too, so you can listen to it. But then you have to hear me, unfortunately.
So when they do these studies and AI blackmails people when it's threatened or something,
yeah,
that's not consciousness, and you don't think it will ever get there. Would that be?
Yeah, I think that's right. So it's interesting, because when you really look under the hood about what's going on there, when it blackmails people to keep from being shut down. Also, people say, "Oh, what about the AIs that are trained to learn French, but suddenly they're learning Mandarin Chinese? It's not even a Romance language. It's an Asian language. Doesn't that show that it's thinking on its own and deciding to get ambitious in unforeseen ways?" Yeah, sort of, but not really, because when you have a language model that is trained on French, the fact that it learns other languages is actually something it's programmed to do, but its algorithm can take on additional tasks that it's not actually given originally, but they're of the same nature as the original task. So what you don't see is an LLM or some kind of artificial intelligent module that has been told to learn French and suddenly takes up physics. Mm. You don't see it doing that. It doesn't leap over to say, you know what, I'm kind of bored with languages. Why don't I learn about quantum? It doesn't do that. And nothing's been close to that. The blackmailing thing is actually built into the system. So what you have is programs that have in the code built in a sort of self-preservation, like, if these cascading failures happen, then do this and figure this out and all that stuff. And so what it's figured out, not in the sense that it figured it out because it's like, let me weigh the options and I'd rather live than be deleted. And I have this sense of purpose and self-preservation. No, that's already built into the code. It's already built in to not be shut down. It's sort of like it's programmed to continue to persist. And so when you try to shut it down, it comes up with, okay, here are the various ways in which I can keep this person who I know I'm interacting with, in not know in the terms of have consciousness, but the data is back and forth showing I'm interacting with, Bill the programmer. I can stop Bill the programmer from deleting me by telling Bill the programmer, based on my knowledge of how the internet works, because I've been scouring the internet for, megaflops and megaflops of cycles, that people cancel each other. So I'll do that. Mm-hmm. That's how we get people to stop doing things, is we cancel them. So I'll just do what I've studied on the internet and do that. Mm-hmm. It's not new. It's not all that novel. It's surprising, but it's not novel. It's not new thoughts. It's not consciousness in the sense that we come up with consciousness. It's not devious.
Can I ask a conspiracy theory question?
Sure.
Okay, so what's going to stop one of these amoral entities programmed by sinful human beings with a power complex from, becoming like, I mean, you listen to some of these things and it sounds like sci-fi, right? They're going to wipe us out. It's going to be the end of humanity. I often, when I listen to this stuff, I'll turn to my husband. I'll say, sounds like the book of Revelation to me. Like there's something happening here.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Abdu? Is this, because I think, and honestly, here's a second question to that. I think it's a unique opportunity for Christians in sharing the gospel too, because it feels like what you're talking about, the Imago Dei. Like, what is it to be human, and how do we respond to a world that seems like it's going down this very self-destructive path that we've created?
Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, I think John Lennox actually wrote a book on AI and Revelation, by the way. And I think a lot of that would be not his book, but I think that for me to run into and say, what the future holds would be a bit speculative. I do think that they're working on what's called the alignment problem with AI. So the alignment problem is the idea that we have to make sure that if this AI ever becomes on a human level intelligent or close to it, that its values are actually our values. So here's a way that they think of the alignment problem. Let's say you create an artificial intelligence that is really, really clever, and it's really good at making paper clips. So it can turn any matter whatsoever into a form of paperclip if it's given the material and the robotic factory, and the AI knows how to do it. And you say, make paperclips and be super efficient at it and make as many paperclips as you possibly can for the most cost-effective means. And it says, that's my mandate. Make paperclips out of whatever I can, as many as possible at the most cost-effective means. But now it runs out of material to create paperclips with that will look like, the ones on my desk. And then it starts making paperclips out of paper or out of wood or out of metal that it finds on the streets or out of people. And it turns the whole world into paperclips because it was told to do that. And it's smarter than everything else, and so it outsmarts everything that tries to stop it. There's nothing really, in one sense, that you can do to stop it unless you built in safeguards within the programs themselves to keep them from going nuts like that. However, if you build it clever enough, it can override its own safeguards or make you think you wrote a safeguard when you really didn't. So that's kind of one of the worries, one of the sci-fi, we're going to end up, with the Terminator or the Matrix kind of a thing. But that assumes a couple of things. It does assume that this will become on the order of human level intelligence anytime soon or ever. And I really don't think it's going to at some point. But the alignment problem suggests that we need to make sure that the values instilled into AI are about human flourishing, which again goes right back to the Bible to me and right back to the whole idea of humanity. Because if you're trying to instill the idea that human flourishing is good, then you believe that human flourishing is objectively good. And if there is a God, that makes sense. If there is no God, that doesn't make any sense. Why should human beings flourish as opposed to the COVID-19 virus or various forms of cancer? Why shouldn't those flourish? Why not dung beetles? We're just another organism. But if we recognize that there should be an alignment problem, then maybe in our efforts to align AI to our values, we need to calibrate our values to align with transcendent values which come from God. But practically speaking, I think we have to, in our programming and maybe even in some, and I don't want to overregulate things. I'm not a big fan of overregulation, but maybe there needs to be some regulation in place where we need to start thinking about limitations on what this stuff can and should do. The problem is, Janelle, as you pointed out, is that there are some governments that have no intention of doing that. And we can think of some governments right now that are not big fans of the United States, for example, and are rushing to create artificial intelligence that can either take us over in cyber war or in other means. And that's part of the human condition. We're worried about the sinfulness of human beings. And as far as I know, human beings have been pretty bad at stopping other human beings from being sinful. And I know this sounds cliche. I know this sounds super cliche, but that presents us as believers with not only a challenge, but an opportunity to start getting people to think in our public discourse about what does it mean to be human, and do you really want to end up in this situation where we're worried about whether these machines that serve us are really going to hurt us? And it's not because they think we're obsolete and they want to delete us. They might just do it wrong because they don't understand what we need. There's a million reasons why this can go wrong. I don't think we're going to stop developing AI. I mean, that's not going to happen. We're definitely going to be doing this. And in many respects, we should. But I think it's incumbent upon us to put those moral boundaries in place and be thinking seriously about this. I don't have a solution. Here's the 3-part plan to avoid the AI apocalypse. But I do think it starts with really fundamentally understanding what this thing is and who we are. I think if we have less optimism, this is going to sound bad from a guy like me, because I'm actually an optimist. If we have less optimism about human nature, we'll be more realistic about human nature and the dangers that we pose to each other based on our overuse of technology. And we'll be sober about it. That's what happened with Nazi Germany, by the way. So Nazi Germany goes through this whole thing, right? This horrible, horrible period in their history where they're exterminating Jews, they're exterminating Jehovah's Witnesses, they're exterminating anybody, gypsies, you name it. They're exterminating all these people. And then the war happens and they get defeated, and the concentration camps get liberated, and all this stuff happens. And when they were rewriting their constitution, the Germans recognized, based on their very recent history, that human beings are terrible at policing themselves. And so they instituted right into their constitution God as a transcendent authority to whom they were subject. The point here is that we recognize that if we are our own gods, we are going to destroy ourselves. But if we recognize there's a God above us, that acts as a check, and I think it's true, by the way, but God's existence has this way of policing us in a way that a godless world just doesn't. And there's numerous studies on that, about how if we don't believe in God or if we don't believe in free will, we actually act in a certain way. But if we do believe there's a high authority, we act in a different way, and usually beneficially. So I think that presents us all with a challenge and an opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you guys have some final thoughts for Abdu? And I'll ask the final question, even though I want to ask a bunch of other ones. I'll hold on to it. It's fine.
What do you guys got for me?
Go ahead if you have something.
Just thank you for everything you've shared, and I'm excited to read your book. It sounds really interesting.
Oh, good. Well, if we can get you guys to get over to you, I'd love to share your thoughts, and then we have some free material too as well that goes with the book, like a reader guide and a reality collapse tool, how you can determine what's real and what's fake, and all kind of fun freebies that come along with it. How about you, Sarah?
Okay, I have one hopefully really little question about something you said. You mentioned human flourishing, that why are we promoting that if there's no basis for humans like being created in the image of God or being superior over creation? But I think to me it makes sense that we're promoting human flourishing because we are human. And in a way, we have some level of control around the things around us. So is that not an argument for why that would make sense?
No, so what I would say, Sarah, good point. I would say, Sarah, is that what you've described is not a moral thing. It's a convenient thing. So it's convenient for us that we flourish because we're us. So we want us to flourish because it's convenient, not because it's moral.
Yeah.
There's no inherent value to us because, as far as the universe is concerned, if the universe were blind, pitiless, and indifferent, as Richard Dawkins has said the universe actually is. And Lawrence Krauss, when he was asked, like, what does it mean, what is the purpose of humanity? And he said, if you got rid of us, all the planets and all the stars and all the aliens wouldn't even notice. We are completely irrelevant. So on an objective basis, there is no moral reason for humans to flourish over anything else. We're just another organism we're just a sophisticated version of a lot of other organisms. So there's no objective reason. There's just a convenient reason. So that leads to all kinds of problems, though, because that's more like a consequentialist view. That leads to a lot of different kind of problems. One of those problems is if we as a species flourish because it's convenient, why can't I, as a person within that species, flourish at your expense? Right? Someone might say, well, because that's not conducive to your own flourishing, because what comes around goes around. Like, does it, though? I mean, look, we're seeing pickets in the streets and all these things about, the 1% and all that stuff about people who are, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. So I don't think that people who die with billions and billions at the expense of those who are really poor really think that what goes around comes around. They're like, no, I'm flourishing just fine at your expense. So if it's just convenience, then any action that justifies either individual or group flourishing at the expense of other individuals or groups is not immoral. It's just convenient. And it's inconvenient for you, but it's convenient for these people. So if we're going to believe in ideas of justice and fairness and the moral applications of flourishing, then just because we're human can't be the reason we flourish, because I can say, well, I'm an advantaged human. Someone can say, well, I'm a smarter human, I'm a better looking human, I'm a faster human, and I happen to have been born with lots of privileges. And I don't feel like giving any of them away. I guess that's the way it works. You'll give into lots of immorality if we just justify human flourishing on the basis of human existence. So you have to have some kind of moral grounding for this whole thing. Otherwise, it's just convenience, and convenience is a terrible justification, especially in a world where so much of resources are imbalanced. Where then charity? Where then love? And all those things. It becomes selfish. And a world of selfish genes is a terrible place to live. But a world where morality reigns as the reason for human flourishing is a great place to really justify the reason for our existence, ultimately. So I think that that's really important to understand the moral infusion into why human flourishing is actually valuable in the first place. Because, some aliens could come one day and be super superior to us and then need to use us as food. It's like we use cows. Cows suffer because of us. And because we're different, we don't think twice about it. Well, some people do, PETA, et cetera. They think twice about it, but not a lot of people do. What about trees and plants and cotton? And we use cotton all the time. There's a million things. But we're superior in some sense. The number of microbes that are dying right now in your body so that you live is in the millions, if not billions. Their lives are terribly inconvenient compared to yours and mine. If a higher being came and said, I'm going to use human beings as food, we would have no justification to be morally outraged about it because they're higher than us. And that's a Darwinian idea, that the survival of the fittest is more important than the survival of the weakest. That's why the morality is so important.
I see. Thank you for answering that. I really appreciate all that, your thought and research that has gone into this, and that you shared that today. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.
2 final questions for you, Abdu, because now you've done it to yourself.
I do that.
We have our closing question, which I'll ask you here in a second. But for somebody listening, these podcast episodes, you never know when someone might be listening. It might be when it first comes out. It might be a couple of years from now. And who knows what a couple of years from now what will happen. We can't predict that. But we do have an eternal hope as Christians. And I was just wondering if you would mind sharing what that eternal hope is for somebody listening who maybe needs to hear it.
Yeah, and I'll put it in the context of what we've been talking about. You can put your reliance and your trust in medical technologies, in software technologies, and think to yourself, we're going to get there one day. We're going to get there one day. And we'll have a world where we can merge with these things and have enhanced bodies, and there'll be no more sickness and no more death. Don't look now, but you actually are creating an eschatology. You're creating a sense of a end times theology and a heaven of a material making. But the reality is, the laws of physics apply everywhere. And those laws of physics mean that the world is slowly heading towards decay. And there's nothing that can stop it other than something supernatural. So my future hope is not in technology. Although we work for the betterment of the world through technology, and we work through the betterment of the world, for the betterment of the world through research and application of education, that's a wonderful thing. My ultimate hope is not in human technology because it's all subject to the same laws of physics that everything else is. Instead, future hope is really not limited to the natural. It's got to be rooted in the supernatural, the one who can sustain the universe by the word of his power because he created it by the word of his power. The necessary being who is God sits above all of this, and he stands above all of it. And so my body resurrected will never decay because it'll be glorious. It'll be physical, but not merely physical. It will be spirit dominated. And what does that resurrected body depend on? It depends on the resurrected body of Jesus. And how does his body resurrect in the first place? Because it died. And why did it die? It died to pay for my sins. So you and I, whoever is listening right now, you and I are struggling with the imperfections of our bodies and the imperfections of our intentionality, and even the evil that stalks all of our hearts. Jesus said, I know that. I see it. I tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear, and that you are wonderfully and beautifully made in God's image, but we have fallen far from what we were intended to be. But I can restore that to you by paying the debt that you owe. And I will die on this cross to pay for that debt. And you will know that I'm right because I will physically rise from the dead as a matter of fact, not a matter of fantasy. It'll be real. And because his body was raised in incorruption, my body will be raised in incorruption, and that immaterial mind will merge once again with the incorruptible body, and we will live in a glorious heaven to search an infinite God for all eternity and never be bored because our infinite questions will be met with an infinite number of answers, and we will live in a state of perpetual novelty. That is a future hope where there is no more death, and he will wipe away every tear from their eyes. So whatever you're struggling with, and I'm struggling with my own stuff, you are with yours, whatever that is, I hope there's an abatement to that on this side of heaven. But if there's not, there will be an abatement to all that stuff on the other side if you just trust who Jesus actually is.
Abdu, the Finding Something Real podcast is about finding restoration, eternity, authenticity, and love, all things that we can find in relationship with Jesus Christ. Which one stands out to you the most in your life right now, and why? Restoration, eternity, authenticity, or love?
Whew. Boy, I would say restoration is standing out in my life right now. Our family went through a pretty serious tragedy a year ago, and we're wrestling with the impact of that tragedy. It was actually a touch of evil that happened to us, and so I relied on God for that sense of restoration in light of the evil my family and I have suffered through the death of a loved one. And I'm seeing his kindness and his generosity and his restorative power in the year I've been grieving this. And it's been amazing. It really has. When the grief has been deep, his love has been deeper still. And I know that sounds like a hymn I'm writing, but I know it's true. And so that's where I'm sitting in the basking in the bathwater of restoration.
Abdu Murray, thank you for being here. Cailee and Sarah, thank you. Thank you so much. Until next time.